Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast, where leaders are empowered to equip and disciple men.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast that encourages and equips leaders to more effectively disciple the men in their sphere of influence. To do that, each week, we talk about the very best ideas and practices in the area of discipleship and ministry to men. Hey, my name is Troy Thomas, and I'm your co-host today, along with the founder and executive director of No Regrets Men's Ministries, Steve Sonneman. Hello, Steve.
Hey, great to be with you again, Troy, and really looking forward to our podcast today.
Well, Steve, today we're going to be talking about the unwritten responsibilities for leaders. Let me start by saying we know and we promote the idea that leadership matters. Leadership is so important in ministry to men. And yet sometimes the expectations of leaders are just unclear. Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah. And that's why I think it's great that we're talking about this today.
Yeah, I've had jobs where I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and we all have. But
Yeah.
I think most of the leaders that are listening to this, most of the leaders that are in ministry to men, they want to do a good job, but often they don't know how that's defined.
Mhm.
What does it mean to be a good leader? How do I make a difference as a leader? You know, we in the church, we often don't provide clear expectations for the men who are leading our ministry to men. And so our leaders don't know what's expected. And in that situation, you know what happens? Many times, what they do is they compare. They compare numbers, they compare events, they compare speakers, they compare programs, they compare themselves with their predecessors or leaders at other churches. And those comparisons become their baseline. Those comparisons become their minimum responsibilities, and they kind of are in their job description, their default job description are those comparisons. But you know, Steve, there's a difference between doing the minimum as a leader and being memorable as a leader. That's what we're going to talk about today. Being memorable as a leader happens when a leader not only covers the baseline, the base expectations, but it also is when a leader is engaged in the unwritten responsibilities. And Steve, before we talk about those unwritten responsibilities, let me just ask you, why is it that so many leaders are unsure of what's expected of them?
Yeah, Troy, I think there's a couple things that is important here for us to think about and to understand. But one is no one told them. And that's on us as leaders. Is that I think you're exactly right. It happens in business, it happens in school with teachers, it happens in the church. That as leaders, we're not clear with our leaders, our small group leaders, our team leaders. A teacher's not clear with the students. A boss is not clear on the project at work. But we're as senior leaders or point leaders, we have not told them what the end goal is, what the expectation is. And so then they don't know what they're aiming for. And there is nothing more frustrating than to not know what the end game is.
Right.
So that's one reason. Another reason is, as leaders, we have not taken the time to think it through. As we just start doing things and we just think busyness equates to being purposeful and to getting things done. And there's a big difference. I know a lot of busy people who are not getting anything done because they haven't taken the time as a leader to clarify, why am I here? What am I about? What's going to make the biggest difference and the greatest impact with who I am as a person and as a leader? A third reason why so many leaders are unsure is I'm just going to say distractions. Is that there's a lot of leaders that are attracted by the shiny object, and so they're just sort of whatever the latest fad is, whether that's in education, in business, in government, in the church, they're just sort of running after the shiny object, and they get distracted. And it's sort of like squirrel, right? They're just off to this for a little bit, then they're off to that for a little bit, and off to that, and they get off task. I think one of the key responsibilities and qualities of an effective leader is focus. The ability to focus on what your task is, what your purpose is, and to be able to say no to the other things. I always say when I'm talking on leading yourself, one of the greatest skills is the ability to say no.
Right.
And so again, I this is a whole nother thing. But why you asked me why? Those are a few reasons why that I think we that they're not unsure of what's expected in them.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I was just reminded as you were talking about. I don't remember who it was, but leaders define the future, right? They define the vision. They define what's going to happen. And if we don't communicate that, if we don't get that out to our co-leaders, our team members, they're not going to know what to do. So, and that happens all the time.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, let's just say a lot of us are dealing with unwritten responsibilities. What are some of the unwritten responsibilities that are out there for leaders in ministry to men?
All right, let's unpack it. Let's work today, with our time. Let's work through 3 to 5. I think, Troy, that you and I have talked about and that we have seen over the years in our ministry to men. And the first sort of unwritten responsibility that I'll mention is understanding what your men are facing. What are the understanding the challenges of being a male Christ follower today? And there's a passage in the Old Testament, and I can't think of it right now, but it says that the men of Issachar understood the times. And they understood the times. And what does that mean for us? We understand our times. And part of leadership is defining reality. And so as a leader, we need to spend time in the trenches and knowing, okay, what are our men facing? And this just comes, we've talked about it in other podcasts, listening. As we're talking to guys before church, after church, in our small group, at a gathering, out to a ball game, we're asking them questions and we're listening. Okay, what are the challenges you're facing today as a man?
Yeah.
What's the greatest challenge you're facing today? What is it like to work in the marketplace today? What's it like, even though it's a little ways now, but what is it like coming out of COVID, and how has that changed you as a family, your work environment, things like
Candidly, that takes some humility, doesn't it, Steve?
Yeah.
To say you don't know it all.
I don't know.
Help me understand what your world is like. Help me understand what it's like in your workplace, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your community. What's going on in your world, to understand that, to really listen to them so that you understand those challenges that they face, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. It takes humility, but I'll tell you, leadership is listening. Leadership is listening. And so you're always asking questions, even keeping maybe on your iPad or phone or wherever a list of questions. And so when I'm getting together with guys before we get to the agenda and other stuff, I always start with some questions just to find out what's going on in their life, how they're doing, how are things between you and your wife and the kids and work and things like that. And but also knowing a little bit of what's going on in culture and then asking some questions. For example, we know that mental health issues are huge for men today. We know that in the country that a large percentage of our people in our churches their number one issue is loneliness.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. Okay, how have you seen the mental health health issues in your workplace, in your neighborhood, in your family, and just to ask those questions? Have you struggled with that? Financially, markets are up and down. There's a lot of uncertainty in our world today with all that's going on in the markets, with wars and uncertainty with leadership. What does that look like for you as a man?
It's really what you're talking about is the power of a well-asked question, right?
Yes.
And sometimes I find myself asking questions that I didn't even really think about. Sometimes the Holy Spirit just kind of puts something on your heart that you ask a guy, and it could be a really simple question like, how do you spend your time when you're not at church, right? So many times when we're at church with guys, we're talking about church. We're talking about the sermon or the music or the crowd or that bathroom was really full
Or the music.
or the music
Or the music.
or talking about what's immediate. And
Right.
if we ask guys, hey, what's going on in your world apart from church? What's going on in your workplace?
Yeah.
Have you seen this elsewhere? Have you seen this problem? Right.
Yeah. What I would suggest, and we've mentioned this, but this is so important, especially as you think about this summer. We talked about a meeting with a purpose. And guys, like Troy just said, there's things you talk about at church normally, but I think it's really helpful if you break away from that and say, hey, can we have coffee together? I'd love to catch up over breakfast or lunch. And to have that meeting with a purpose where you get together for coffee and you just come with a list of questions, and he'll say, well, why do you want to get together? Right? Because there's got to be an agenda. And I'll say, hey, I just want to catch up. That's what I've been doing this summer. Hey, I haven't seen you for a while. I'd love to catch up, anytime in the next few weeks. And then just come with a couple of those questions like we've just gone over.
Yeah.
And just use it hey, I'd love to tell me about your world.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to challenge myself, Steve, and I know you do the same thing, but I try to challenge myself to have a couple conversations like that every week.
Yeah.
With guys that I haven't connected with, brand new connection, or maybe an old connection that needs to be renewed, somebody to reach out to each week. And if I can just have a couple of those conversations, it's amazing how much I can learn about where men are at.
Right. And I'll tell you, guys, just keep this in mind. This is ministry to men.
Yeah.
It's not a program, it's not an event, it's not that big stuff. But when you get together one-on-one with another guy, man, you're saying, I value you. What you have to say is important. I believe in you. I'm listening to you. And that guy is going to go away encouraged. I'll tell you right now. And he's going to be on your team. Yeah. And you're not doing it for that reason, but boy, it goes a long way.
And I know you do this because you've talked about this so many times, but I find myself with lots of little post-it notes with men's names on them.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Little lists, little 3x5 cards, and I'm writing down names all the time. If you look at my desk at home, it's full of a bunch of names, right? And those names are actually prompts for me to connect with those guys, to reach out to those guys, to ask those guys questions, what's going on in the world, to pray for them.
Yeah.
It's a reminder.
That is so good.
Very informal.
Hey guys, as you're listening to this, maybe you just start with say, you know what, I'm gonna do one. Start there and just say, okay, who can I call? Who can I text, email to get together with next week sometime? And maybe just make it your goal to do one. And then after that, maybe it's one a week. And if you did one a week for the rest of the summer, oh my goodness, it is going to put your ministry so far ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's one, Steve, is trying to understand where those men are at, what the challenges are. And to do that, we've got to stay connected. We've got to be thinking about them. We've got to ask them questions.
Mm-hmm.
Amen. Listen up. Time spent in fellowship, prayer, and study with other guys is absolutely crucial in this day and age. But trust me, I know how overwhelming it can be to start, maintain, or multiply men's small groups. So No Regrets is here to help you. We have developed some new digital content called Basecamp, Bible Studies for Men. All the studies are found on our website at menwithnoregrets.org under Discipleship Resources. The optimal place for you to grow is a men's small group, and we are here to provide your group with the content you need.
What are some other unwritten responsibilities of leaders in ministry to men?
I would say another one that really rises to the top is expressing empathy and compassion in times of difficulty or in even tragic situations. Not a whole lot written on this or talked about this, but the ministry of presence.
Yeah.
It's just being there.
Right.
And as a guy, as someone who's working with men, it's guaranteed that the men of your church are going to go through hard times.
Yeah.
And whether that's the diagnosis of breast cancer with their spouse, losing a job, losing a loved one, financial difficulties, struggling with an addiction, it's numerous what could happen. But what I've discovered in some of the most important times of ministry for me have not been at a small group meeting or a large group event, but they've been sitting by a hospital bed. It's by just getting together with a guy after he receives the bad news and just being available.
Yeah.
It's being there. It's that presence in the ministry of presence.
It's real simple, isn't it? Just show up.
You just got to show up. That's what it is. You got to show up, and part of that is have that ear to the ground to hear what's going on. And because they may, oftentimes what I've discovered at least is that oftentimes when a guy is going through a hard time, especially like the loss of a job or financial struggles, they're gonna pull back. They're gonna hide because they're embarrassed and they feel like they should get through this by themselves. They got to pull themselves up. And so I'm always listening as I'm talking to others. Hey, did you hear about Bill that he lost his job? Boy, that just is a trigger, and that's the post-it note. Okay, get together with Bill.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, guys, this is when guys retreat when they need the fellowship the most.
Yeah.
They want it the least. They pull back.
We need to be honest about this. I mean, this is scary.
Yeah,
Right.
it is.
This is very intimidating to think that you need to show up in somebody's worst moments. It can be a pretty large responsibility, right?
Yeah.
I'm not equipped. I'm not trained. I'm not. I don't know what to say. I haven't done this. I'm not a trained professional. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a pastor. How do you expect me? I'm just a leader in this ministry of men.
Yeah.
How do you expect me to actually help in that setting?
Mm-hmm.
We'll show up.
Yep.
That's
it.
Right.
Yeah. And you don't have to say anything. All you have to do is show up, give them a hug, cry with them, hug them.
Yeah. That's so powerful.
It is. It's so, but like you
Unwritten
said,
responsibility.
it's an unwritten responsibility. Yeah. Absolutely huge.
Okay.
What would you say? What would be another one that sort of over the years?
I think one of the unwritten responsibilities that I mean, it's kind of out there, but your responsibility as a leader in ministry men is to point men to the right teaching, to healthy, gospel-centered environments, to call men up, not sideways, not down, but up to the right teaching, to healthy situations and healthy gospel-centered environments that are going to build these men out as disciples of Christ. So you need to make the call.
What does that look like? I mean, how you've been involved for a number of years. How do you do that in a church context? With a bunch of small groups or large group gatherings. What? Yeah,
I think one part of it, and we covered this in another podcast, is using the time you have to prepare for those situations where you need to make a call. You've got the study that you're having everyone do right now. Well, you need to have something on deck. You need to have the next, right? You need to understand what's coming, because the guys halfway through the book, they're going to start to be thinking, hey, what are we doing next? And so you have the responsibility. Somebody has got to lead, and it's you. You've got to pick that next step, whatever it is. If it's curriculum in a study, if it's an event that you're going to add to next year's plan. What is the next step? It's always about the next. If your response to what are we doing next year? Well, we're going to do the same as this year. That's not going to go very far, and it's not going to build ministry, right? You've got to be the one who sets direction, who says, this is where we're going, and this is why we're going there, right?
Yep. And like we've talked about in other podcasts over the last couple of years, it's looking at that content, speakers, curriculum, and saying, like is it gospel centered? Is it going to be pointing guys to Christ? Is it transformational based? Do we have, like you said exactly, do we have the curriculum lined up for the rest of this year, for these 9 months? So it just sort of flows. Is there a connection? Does it flow from one thing to another? But then, or do we need speakers lined up? if we're doing
Yeah.
6 breakfasts this year, or we're having a fall retreat or a spring retreat. Okay, who are the speakers going to be that we know that can speak to men,
Yeah.
that speak about Jesus, that are going to keep it biblically focused, that are going to be relevant to where men are at, that are theologically consistent with our church and what we believe. Those type of things need to be at least thought about. And again, maybe what you might have to do is talk to your pastor about that.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're not sure, get a little input and direction from them on these type of things.
There's a hard edge to this one also. Providing the right teaching and healthy gospel-centered environments sometimes means saying no. Sometimes it means saying, kill that thing. We've got to stop doing that thing because it's not healthy. It's not teaching us anything. It's not going anywhere. It's not resulting in any kind of transformation. It's time to end that program, that event, that thing that we've been doing forever.
Yeah.
And that takes courage, and that's an unwritten responsibility.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to say, that's not helping us anymore.
Yeah. And I know what's going to happen, where some guys in the church are going to come to you and say, I really think we should do this book, or we should watch this video series. And that's where you have to make that call, because sometimes that stuff is just a little bit out there. It's on the edge. It's not going to be very edifying, or it's just going to cause more problems than good. And you got to make the call, like you said.
So first was understanding what men face, then expressing empathy, compassion, come alongside men in those difficult situations. Third was providing the right teaching and healthy environments for men to grow. Fourth, I think is really super important, building authentic, lifelong relationships. Steve, you've talked about this a number of times, that you started off saying we want to be friends.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Ministry is about relationship. And as a leader, you want to, that's where it starts. And again, guys, you might be in a smaller church and thinking about, oh gosh, programs and events, and I got to do all this planning and things like that. And what we wanted to say, and we have said over and over again, is just start by reaching out to a few guys, and it's just building those relationships. It's what Jesus did over 50 times in the Gospels. Jesus reached out to the non-religious people, and he just built relationship. He said, Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. Let's have dinner together. And so many instances like that, and where he took the initiative and he built a relationship. And he said, Matthew, follow me. Peter, follow me. He went up to them and said, follow me, be with me. He didn't call them into a program. He called them into a relationship. And so for one of the unwritten responsibilities is to build those relationships. And one of the keys I have found, and I know you have too, Troy, is that you need to be authentic.
Yeah.
Is that we have to get off the pedestal and make it seem like we have our whole life figured out. Everything's great. I have no problems and no struggles, but rather just to really be open, be honest, be transparent with our lives, with our struggles, with our sin. And of course, what's going to happen is when you start to have those conversations, maybe you're, having coffee with a guy, he's going to look across the table and he goes, you too?
Yeah.
I thought I was the only one that struggled with that. I thought I was the only one that had that problem. I thought I was the only one that dealt with that issue. And boy, you'll just see the walls coming down.
Right.
You'll see the relationship being established through that transparency, that consistency, that availability. All those type of things that we've just been talking about will help to develop those relationships.
Yeah. Loneliness is such a problem with men.
Mm-hmm.
It's out there and it's so powerful, but yet what breaks down loneliness is authentic, lifelong relationships. Guys can call on other guys. They can reach out when they're hurting. They can reach out in the good times and the bad times. They can just do life together. You pointed out a little piece of scripture to me years ago, and I think about this all the time. Mark 3, Jesus goes up on the mountain and he calls to them those who he desired to be with him. He appointed 12, and here it is, so that they might be with him. They might be with him. They might be friends. They might travel around. And you think about Jesus' public ministry. They ate together. They hiked together. They camped together. They traveled together. They went everywhere together. They were friends. They walked life's path together. And so that's an unwritten responsibility of leaders. It's never going to be in any kind of job description, right? But it's out there.
Again, when you look at the Gospels, what is it? 76, 78% of the time it was with the 12. It wasn't the big public spectacles. It was just like you said, walking to the next village, having a meeting. I think of John 21 where Jesus restores Peter. I call that the original men's breakfast. Where he was on the beach, he was making a breakfast, and he said, Peter, just take care of my sheep. And he restored them after denying 3 times. And I think again it went back to that relationship that Jesus had with Peter. And that's what we can do. Okay, we're almost out of time here. We have one more. Pointing men who don't know Jesus to Jesus. Troy, you want to just comment on that and get us started?
Real simple, guys. You have an unwritten responsibility that if a guy doesn't know Jesus, by all means, point him to Jesus. I mean, that is should be at root the mission of all ministry to men is to make disciples who make disciples. We want men to know about Jesus. We can do a lot of events. We can do a lot of small groups. We can do a lot of programming. We can do a lot of ministry planning. We can do all these other things. But if we're not pointing men who don't know Jesus to Jesus, we're missing out. We're missing out on our job as leaders. And so it could be as simple as sharing the gospel with them, opening up God's word with them, telling your story to them. Don't let men be kind of passive attendees in your ministry without them knowing clearly who Jesus is. And that doesn't mean that you can't open up your ministry to men who don't yet know Jesus, but don't let them stay there.
Right. No, exactly. And guys, I think in your role as a leader, you will have opportunity as you're having coffee and breakfast with guys, you're meeting with guys and talking to guys. You are going to fairly soon realize that there are guys who don't know Jesus. They're coming because their wife wants them to come, or they're being dragged in, or they're going through a hard time and they're looking for God in the midst of that. Whatever the reason is, that you're going to have an opportunity to explain the gospel and to share your story. And I just I'll mention this real quick, Troy, that if any of you are saying, but I don't know how to do that. So you're not alone. But I want to tell you this, that we have just finished and launched a new course called Disciple Maker 101. And in that course, which you can do online, you can do by yourself, or you can do in a small group, maybe as a leadership team, you can learn what does it mean to write my story. We give you the tools to do that. How do I walk someone through the gospel story? We help you to do that. How to start a small group? We help you do that. These basic things of introducing someone to Jesus is what DM 101 is all about. You can find out more information on our website, or you can call us and we'll help you. But we put together training specifically for this one, because this is one of the unwritten responsibilities of every leader, to be prepared to give an answer for the hope that's within us.
Well, Steve, this has been great. I know one of our written responsibilities is to stay on time. So we're going to have to call this one. Leaders, we hope this episode has been helpful to you as you're making disciples of men in your sphere of influence, as you're on the forefront, on the front lines of ministry to men. And so thank you for dialing in. And don't forget something very important. If this podcast is helpful to you, follow our show, share our show, leave a comment on the website, or better yet, leave a review. We'd love it if you give us 5 stars on the review form. But for Steve Sonderman, I'm Troy Thomas. It's been a real pleasure. Until next time, Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for joining the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. For more information and to access past recordings, please visit www.menwithnoregrets.org/podcast.